Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a world where people can memorize two shuffled decks of cards in under 2 minutes.
Or thousands of random digits. It sounds completely nuts.
It really does. Like some kind of superhuman ability we could only dream of. But what if it turns out, well, it's not what you think at all?
It's truly remarkable stuff, and that's precisely what Joshua Foer explores in his incredible book, Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything.
Ah, yes, Foer. He was a journalist, wasn't he?
Exactly. He initially set out just to investigate the quirky world of memory championships. He expected to find savants, people with these innate, unexplainable gifts.
But that's not what he found.
Not really. What he discovered instead, and what we'll unpack for you today, is far more surprising and, I think, incredibly relevant for all of us.
Okay, so our mission on this deep dive is to explore the surprising truths about how memory really works. You hear people talk about photographic memory, but is that real? Is extraordinary memory a gift, or is it maybe a skill?
That's the big question. And Foer's journey suggests it's much more skill than gift. We'll also get into this idea of the art of forgetting, which sounds a bit paradoxical.
It does. I'm genuinely curious to unpack all of this. We'll take a journey from, ancient techniques all the way to modern science and figure out what it means for you in this age of constant information overload.
Sounds good.
So let's start where Foer started. He walks into the 2005 U.S. Memory Championship expecting, as he called it, a Super Bowl of savants. He's picturing these genius types, right?
Yeah, people just born different. But what he found instead was this group of mental athletes. And almost all of them insisted they started with pretty average memories.
Okay, so right off the bat, that challenges things.
It immediately tackles one of the most persistent myths out there. This idea of photographic memory.
Is there any scientific basis for that?
Barely. I mean, the literature really only points to one highly questionable case. A Harvard student named Elizabeth back in 1970. She could supposedly fuse these random dot patterns shown days apart. Yeah, it's very debatable. No one's really replicated it conclusively. So, true photographic memory. Probably not a thing, scientifically speaking.
What about those legendary stories, though, like the Shas Polak, these Polish Talmudic scholars who knew thousands of pages of text inside out?
Incredible, right? They could supposedly tell you which words a pin went through on any page of the Talmud. But again, was it photographic? Unlikely.
So what was it then?
It was a result of single-minded, lifelong dedication, intense focus and practice. Honestly, if an average person dedicated their entire life to memorizing that much text, they'd probably get pretty good at it too.
Makes sense. And then there's the famous case of S, the Russian journalist studied by Luria. He had this seemingly unforgettable memory.
Oh yeah, S is fascinating. He could recall lists of 70 digits, forwards, backwards, even 16 years later. Just perfectly.
Oh, for him, it wasn't just rote memorization, was it? He had synesthesia.
Exactly. That played a huge role. For S, every sound had a color, a texture, maybe even a taste. Numbers had personalities. 1 was a proud man, 2, a spirited woman.
He told Luria, "When I hear the word green, a green flower pot appears." It sounds amazing, but also maybe overwhelming.
It definitely had drawbacks. What's really interesting is that despite this incredible, almost automatic recall, S struggled with abstract concepts, things like infinity or metaphors. If he couldn't visualize it vividly, he couldn't grasp it.
So his unique brain was a blessing and a curse.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so if our normal everyday memory for things like numbers or abstract ideas is actually quite limited, how do people pull off these amazing memory feats?
This brings us to George Miller, right? The magical number 7.
Exactly. Miller's 1956 paper is classic. It showed our short-term working memory, the stuff you're actively thinking about, can generally only hold about 7 items, plus or minus 2. So 5 to 9 things.
That's not a lot.
It's a tiny mental scratch pad, really, and it only lasts a few seconds. The key insight here, and what Foer learned, is that memory champions don't have bigger scratch pads. They've just learned incredibly clever ways to pack way more information into each of those 5 to 9 slots. They make each item huge. Ah, okay. Chunking information.
Precisely. But it's easy to feel like our memory is just bad. Foer points out, though, that even average memories are remarkably powerful in certain ways, like with pictures.
Right. Tell us about that experiment Ed Cook did. Cook was Foer's memory coach, yeah.
That's him. So Cook showed a room of students 30 random pictures just for a few seconds each. After a half-hour break, guess what?
They remembered most of them.
Every single one. Everyone in the room. And Cook said they could have done that with 10,000 slides, and people would still remember almost all of them.
10,000.
Our visual memory is just incredibly powerful. It's this profound, often untapped capacity we all have. So the takeaway isn't about being born with a better brain. It's about learning to use the brain you have more effectively, more memorably.
And that brings us neatly to this ancient technique, the memory palace. It has a pretty dramatic origin story, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. The legend goes back to Simonides of Chios, a Greek poet around the 5th century BC. He's at this big banquet, steps outside for a moment, and boom, the roof collapses. Yeah, horrific. Everyone inside was mangled beyond recognition. But Simonides, because he remembered exactly where everyone had been sitting around the table, could identify all the bodies for the families.
And that was the supposed birth of the method of loci, the memory palace.
That's the story. The core principles were later written down in this Latin rhetoric textbook, the Rhetorica ad Herennium. It's like the Bible for memory athletes even today.
So how does it actually work? How do you build one?
Well, you start with a place you know intimately, like really well. Your childhood home, your walk to work, your local grocery store aisles.
Okay, got it.
Then you visualize a specific route through that space.
So.
And at distinct points along that route, maybe the front door, the kitchen counter, the sofa, you mentally place vivid images of whatever you're trying to remember.
And the key is vivid, right? The weirder, the better.
Absolutely. The ad Herennium literally advises making the images funny, lewder, and more bizarre. Peter of Ravenna, a 15th century memory guy, even suggested using images of beautiful virgins to really excite the memory.
Huh. Well, that would probably stick. I remember Foer's example from Ed Cook memorizing a to-do list like pickled garlic in the driveway.
Claudia Schiffer swimming in cottage cheese at the front door.
And Pete smoked salmon draped over the piano. It's completely absurd.
But you remember it, don't you? The more outlandish, the more sensory details, the more emotion you pack into that image, the better it anchors itself to its spot in your palace.
So it's less about rote recall and more about creativity.
Exactly. A great mnemonist is creating these wild, rich scenes on the fly. It's a creative act as much as a memory act. It takes practice, for sure, but it's fundamentally a skill you can learn.
It really does sound like a learnable superpower. But if it's so powerful, why aren't we all using memory palaces constantly? Clearly, the role of memory itself has changed over time.
Massively. Think about ancient oral cultures. Before widespread writing, memory was everything. Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, the Indian Vedas, these massive works were transmitted purely through memory.
How do they even do that?
They relied heavily on built-in mnemonic aids. Things like repetitive phrases, clever Odysseus, rosy-fingered dawn, and really formulaic plot structures. These weren't lazy writing, they were memory tools. Clichés were essential.
So clichés, which we try to avoid now, were actually crucial for remembering stuff back then. Rhythmic, structured, repetitive, easier for the brain to lock onto.
Precisely. And the stories themselves got refined over generations of retelling. Irrelevant bits got forgotten, leaving the most memorable core. It was almost like remembering by forgetting the unnecessary details.
Then writing came along and changed everything.
It did, but gradually. Early texts were often written in scriptio continuo, just a long string of letters, no spaces, no punctuation.
Hard to read.
You basically had to read it aloud to make sense of it. So writing initially served more as a prompt for memory, not a replacement. St. Augustine, way back in the 4th century AD, was amazed to see his teacher reading silently. That was weird back then.
Wow, so silent reading was a novelty because it cut that direct link to hearing it in your head.
Kind of, yeah. Then, over centuries, you get innovations like chapters, paragraphs, page numbers, indexes. Slowly, the need to hold everything inside your head decreased.
And the definition of being smart changed too.
Exactly. Erudition shifted from possessing knowledge internally to knowing where to find it externally. You mentioned Peter of Ravenna. His goal wasn't to recite everything verbatim, but to be a living concordance, a human index to his library.
Which leads us straight to today, doesn't it? The extreme of externalized memory.
Right. Think of Gordon Bell, the Microsoft researcher, doing life logging. Wearing a camera, recording audio, scanning documents, creating this massive digital surrogate memory.
A perfect record of everything. Which brings up that huge question. If we can just record everything, why bother training our internal memory at all? Why put in the work?
It's a critical question. And this is where the science of expertise, particularly the work of Anders Ericsson, gives us some really important answers.
Ericsson, he's the deliberate practice guy, right?
Yeah, that's him, the expert on experts. His classic experiment involved a student known as SF. SF started with a normal digit span, like 7 numbers.
Okay.
Over 2 years of consistent practice, focusing on techniques like chunking numbers into running times or dates, SF expanded his digit memory tenfold to over 70 digits.
Whoa, so memory capacity isn't
That's
fixed.
what it showed.
Yeah.
It can be trained dramatically. It's not just about capacity either. Think about London taxi drivers.
Ah, the ones who have to learn the knowledge, all those streets.
Exactly. Years of navigating London's complex layout actually leads to physical changes in their brains and an enlarged hippocampus, the area involved in spatial navigation.
Their brains literally change because of what they're doing.
Yes. But here's the really mind-blowing part, connecting back to Foer's experience. When researchers scanned the brains of memory athletes while they were memorizing.
What did they find? Different brains, bigger memory bits.
Nope. Structurally, their brains looked pretty much average. No special hardware. But when they were actively memorizing, their fMRI scans lit up in completely different areas than usual.
Which areas?
The regions involved in visual memory and spatial navigation. The same areas that are enlarged in the London cabbies.
Okay, wait. So unlike S, the guy with synesthesia, these memory athletes weren't born seeing numbers as colors or whatever.
No, they weren't innate synesthetes. They were consciously choosing to turn abstract information, numbers, cards, names, into vivid images and place them along mental journeys. They were deliberately using the memory palace technique.
So the brain activity wasn't innate, it was a result of the technique they learned.
Exactly. They basically trained themselves to use their brains differently, activating those powerful visual and spatial systems through practice. They learned to remember like S, but using a method.
That's incredible. And this links to Erickson's idea of getting past the OK plateau, right?
Yes. Most of us learn a skill driving, typing, whatever, reach a point where we're good enough, and then we stop improving. We go on autopilot.
Guilty as charged.
We all do it. Experts, however, avoid this. They engage in deliberate practice. That means constantly pushing beyond their comfort zone, focusing intensely on technique, setting specific goals, and crucially, seeking constant feedback. They're essentially practicing failing.
Practicing failing, how does that work?
Think about surgeons versus, say, mammographers diagnosing scans. Surgeons usually get immediate feedback. Did the operation work? They learn quickly. Mammographers might not find out if their diagnosis was right for years, if ever. That lack of immediate feedback makes improvement much harder.
So feedback is key for deliberate practice.
Absolutely. It guides the refinement of technique. Like chess masters, they aren't necessarily born smarter. They've spent years deliberately studying positions, analyzing games, getting feedback. They build up this huge mental library of chunks, patterns they recognize instantly. They literally see the board differently.
So expertise isn't just having the knowledge, it's having it organized in these useful chunks built through practice.
That's the core of it.
Okay, this is fascinating. But what about those people who seem genuinely different? The savants? Like Daniel Tammet, Brain Man, or Kim Peek, the inspiration for Rain Man. Are their abilities totally separate from these learned techniques?
It's a great question. Daniel Tammet, for instance, is famous for learning languages incredibly quickly and reciting pi to thousands of digits. He experiences numbers as shapes, colors, textures, a form of synesthesia. He performs complex math visually. He insists it's innate.
And Kim Peek, he had this unbelievable memory for facts from thousands of books, right? But struggled socially.
Exactly. Peek had brain structure abnormalities and a lower IQ, but this truly encyclopedic recall. He's often seen as the classic example of an innate, almost accidental savant. So the question becomes, could there be, as Foer puts it, a little Rain Man in all of us?
Meaning these abilities might be hidden or dormant somehow.
That's a theory some researchers are exploring. The idea is that maybe our dominant left brain hemisphere, the logical, analytical part, actually inhibits these kinds of raw, savant-like perceptual abilities that might reside in the right hemisphere.
Can they test that?
Well, there have been experiments using TMS transcranial magnetic stimulation to temporarily dampen activity in the left brain. And sometimes, participants briefly show enhanced artistic or calculation skills. It's controversial, but suggestive.
Wow, like switching off the filter lets something else emerge.
Potentially. But this isn't just about extreme cases. Think about Raymond Matthews, the teacher for profiles in the Bronx.
Right, he uses memory techniques with his students from underprivileged backgrounds.
Yes, his talented 10th. He actively challenges the modern educational trend that often dismisses memorization. He argues quite powerfully, you can't learn without memorizing, and if done right, you can't memorize without learning.
So for him, memory isn't just rote facts, it's the foundation for deeper understanding.
Exactly. His students learn these techniques, memorize key quotes and facts, and it gives them confidence, helps them structure arguments, and frankly helps them ace standardized tests, opening doors for them. It shows the practical power of these skills in a real-world educational setting.
It really grounds the whole thing. So, okay, fast forward. After a year of intense training with Ed Cook, steeped in Erickson's ideas, Foer goes back to the U.S. Memory Championship, this time as a competitor.
And he's armed with what he calls European weaponry, specifically the PAO system.
Person, action, object. How did that give him an edge?
It's just much more efficient for memorizing things like decks of cards quickly. Instead of one image per card, PAO lets you combine 3 cards into one single bizarre image.
Or Albert Einstein juggling flaming torches.
Something like that. One card is the person, one the action, one the object. Condensing 3 pieces of info into one mental picture makes you much faster than someone trying to memorize card by card, which is common among American competitors then.
And it worked.
Oh, spectacularly. Foer smashed the U.S. record in speed cards, memorized a shuffled deck in 1 minute and 40 seconds. And then he went on to win the entire championship.
The journalist became the U.S. memory champion. That's quite a story arc.
It's an incredible testament to deliberate practice and these techniques, truly.
But here's the twist, the really interesting paradox. After winning, after proving he could do these amazing memory stunts, his everyday memory didn't really change much.
That's the kicker, isn't it? He could memorize names at a party, historical dates, decks of cards, but he still forgot where he parked his car. He'd still misplace his keys.
So what does that mean?
It highlights that these memory skills are often highly specific. He'd install incredibly powerful software for certain tasks, learning techniques to structure and store specific kinds of information. But his fundamental hardware, his basic innate working memory, that magical number 7, seemed unchanged.
You get good at what you practice, basically.
Pretty much. Memorizing decks of cards doesn't magically make you remember your grocery list unless you consciously apply a technique to the grocery list too.
So what's the final takeaway? If training doesn't necessarily fix everyday forgetfulness, what did Foer gain?
I think his most profound conclusion wasn't just how to remember things better. It was that the process of training his memory forced him to become more mindful, more attentive to the world.
Ah, interesting.
He realized that remembering isn't passive. It only happens if you consciously decide to pay attention, to take notice. It's an act of presence, of engagement with the moment.
That's a powerful idea.
And that is the compelling answer to our big question. Why bother cultivating internal memory in an age of external digital brains? Why put in the effort?
Because it makes us pay more attention.
That, and because, as Foer concludes, our memories are not just data storage. They are fundamentally what make us us. Our memories shape our values, our character, our understanding of the world, our ability to think critically and creatively.
Right. You can't Google wisdom or insight or humor.
Exactly. No external hard drive has ever produced a great joke or a work of art or a novel invention. Our ability to connect ideas, to find meaning, to build relationships, to participate in culture, all of that relies on the knowledge and experiences stored within us.
So nurturing our memory isn't just about remembering facts.
It's about nurturing something deeply, essentially human. It's about building the internal scaffolding that allows us to live richer, more connected, more creative lives.
So the final thought for you listening is, what experiences, what moments, what knowledge will you choose to truly pay attention to today? What will you decide is worth remembering?